Welcome back to Professor Sky's Haiti, the most important country in the world. It's a class that I'm teaching. I just did a midterm and a midterm prep, so it's been a little while since I've had a class here. But I wanted to sort of change tack. You see, the first half is entirely dedicated to the Haitian Revolution. And we're going to be moving on to Boyer and the rest, leading right up until 2025 here in the second half of the semester. But I want to do something different by introducing literature, and in particular, one work of literature, which I think serves as a nice way of dramatizing and thinking of the deeper themes of history that come out through the history of Haiti in a literary form. So it's this book, it's this play. La Tragédie du Roi Christophe by Aimé Césaire. I'll be reading the English translation, The Tragedy of King Christophe. I'll be explaining why as I get in here, but I just want to let you know. If you want to read the play yourself, today we will be discussing Act 1. So feel free to take a break. It's about 50 pages. It might take you about half an hour to an hour. I will include a link in the description of a place where you can just like sign up to some internet archive for free. As far as I can tell, they don't ever charge you money, and you can just read the play. Or you can get the play. But if not, even if you don't want to, stick around. I'll be explaining what happens in each scene. I'll be explaining, why it's important, why it's such a great work of fiction, and why I think it serves to help us find the narrative morale in all the history that happened. The how fiction can help us see that in some ways nonfiction can be just as fantastic. So let's get into the story of the tragedy of King Christophe. And I'm going to be taking you to my PowerPoint as I always do. Please continue to share. Yes. Okay, let me just make sure this looks correct here. Checking. Great. Students and friends, I am Professor Sky. My name is perhaps known to you. I have endeavored to teach about Haiti. I want curiosity and a thirst for complex understanding to reign in this class. I am working to help that happen. Unite yourselves, students, and learn with me for the same cause. Why weren't you born in Haiti? Why weren't you in Haiti in 2010? And why aren't you living in Haiti right now? Those are three questions for my students. Maybe some of you were born in Haiti, were there in 2010, and are there right now. In which case, bonjour. Okay. So this is you might have noticed. I'm going to be titling this video for YouTube something like a Shakespearean tragedy in the Caribbean, something like that. Or a Shakespearean tragedy in Haiti. That probably makes the most sense. And I'm going to be sort of trying to drive home this concept that what Shakespeare did so well was he found well, he did a lot of things well, but one of the things he did really well was he found the narrative interest, the the stories within history, and was able to take tales of great men and great women and elevate them to this higher level in which their story is kind of an eternal story. Aimé Césaire is going to do that, but not with Macbeth or Hamlet or Henry the Fourth, Henry the Fifth, or any of the Henrys. Actually, a totally different Henry, of course, King Christophe. So for my class, this is just called The Tragedy of King Christophe, Act 1. These are the different texts that I will be referencing. So this is the French version that I read. I bought it for literally €6, a pretty good deal. The one in the middle is the one that is available for free. That is the one that is translated by Mannheim. It's a good translation, not a great translation. In their introduction, Breslin and Ney put forth the idea that this play is not as popular in English as other plays by Césaire um, because of the translation. I don't know if that's true, but I got to tell you, this is just one of my favorite plays. I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's totally well done, totally well made. It does everything that you want historical theater to do. All right, so let's get to it. We'll be talking about who was Aimé Césaire, who was this author, what is Negritude, what is a tragic hero, what is a surrealistic poetic soliloquy. We will talk a little bit about the setting and place. We will discuss patrimony, the tragedy of King Christophe, and then, of course, for my class, we'll be discussing the midterm exam. They did well, by the way. In general, they did quite well. So, who was Aimé Césaire? So he was not Haitian, and that might bug you. Okay. Part of me is annoyed that I'm talking about literature and I'm not including Haitian literature for reasons which we've already described in this class. Education in Haiti is often was attained with great difficulty. It had to be a secondary consideration during the revolution. We'll be studying the evolution of education and culture, but it just happens to be that this author is. From Martinique and one of the best authors of the 20th century. I'll be asking my students, how is it different from Haiti? Well, obviously, it's like 1,500 miles away. So it's in the Caribbean, but it's very, very far away. And it's still a part of France. If you wanted to buy this book in Martinique, you'd be paying with euros because they use the euros. That's how much it's still part of France. And in fact, Aimé Césaire, despite the fact he is one of, if not the most definitive voice on the nature of post-colonial tension and the nature of colonialism. He was not against remaining a part of France for financial stability. Whole other question outside the purview of this class. Okay, so he's from there, still part of France, a poet, author, politician. He was a mayor in Martinique for like many, many decades. And most importantly for this class, and the reason that I think it's important to teach this is that I get to teach my students, who again are freshmen, mostly 17, 18-year-olds from Western New York. And I'm going to be teaching them the concept of negritude, negritude. Okay, so this is a phil philosophy, a philosophical framework developed in the 20th century, around the middle of the 20th century. Okay. Uh, I guess actually earlier than that, I guess the 30s. I always associate it more with the 50s, but I guess it was developed in the 30s and partly by Césaire along with Senghor and Damas. Negritude is a consciousness of and a pride in the cultural and physical aspects of the African heritage. Negritude is the state or condition of being black. Part of what makes any movement dangerous to systems of power is any international movement. The international workers' movement scares the hell out of capitalists because it's better for capitalists if an Amazon worker in America thinks that he's better than an Amazon worker in Mexico because he was born in America. And if he actually looked into the mirror and realized an Amazon worker in America has more in common with an Amazon worker in Mexico than he does with Jeff Bezos. And just because we're both American doesn't mean we're the same. We are international workers. That's the origin of a lot of communism and thoughts like that, right? That's the big fear of the industrialist and the capitalist, is that eventually the workers of the world will unite. Hasn't happened yet. So this is like that, but for blackness, for being of African descent. It is trying to create some kind of link that connects the people of Africa to people who have African descent in the Caribbean, in South America, in North America, everywhere. The idea that there is some need to, the term in French is valorize, to value and to cherish blackness as an idea, as a condition. Here's a description from Doris Kadish in relationship to this play. Negritude for Césaire is what blacks think, remember, and understand. It is not what they are in some essentialist sense by national origin or race. Nick Nesbitt provides an illumination definition of negritude that foregrounds the notion of black consciousness. Negritude refers to a collective self-understanding of the African diaspora emerging from a common experience of subjugation and enslavement. He goes on to point out that both Césaire's term and the subsequent cultural movement that took its name emphasized the possible negation of that subjugation through racial struggle and affirmation, of which the Haitian Revolution is emblematic. Christophe would seem to be a precursor of negritude in the Césarian sense, but Césaire's La Tragédie au roi Christophe is complex, and his treatment of Christophe in that work is ambiguous. So, was Christophe a great figure of negritude, of understanding the connection between Africans and people in the New World and blackness as a sense. We'll discuss that. That'll be part of the play. That's part of the idea. That's part of the drama in here, right? Because that's the whole idea behind all these great plays and great tragedies and all Shakespeare's great plays and great tragedies is that, the characters have different personalities. They have different emphasis. Okay. So the entire time you are reading this, understand it is written by somebody who believes deeply in the need for and the glory of negritude. Okay. A consciousness and pride in the physical aspects of African heritage, a stated condition of being black, while also using Henri Christophe as a complicated figure who represents or does not represent negritude. You could, and I'm sure the paper's been written at least 45 times, do an analysis. Does Henri Christophe represent negritude? I'm not going to give you my version of that paper today, but that is a question we could be asking. Then we get to the concept of a tragic hero, because that's the thing. Every tragedy needs a tragic hero. Well, basically, right? When I say tragedy, I don't mean sad. I don't mean like, oh, it's so sad. There was a school bus and it blew up. That's not actually a tragedy in the dramatic sense. It's really sad, but it's not a tragedy in that sense, right? Maybe the bus driver being a drunk. Maybe the bus driver was like a child prodigy and was considered to be the smartest boy in the whole town, and then he just couldn't get his life together. He ended up being a school bus driver. His story would be a tragedy. Okay. Well, let's just get to it. What is a tragic hero? Let's get to some definitions here. Okay. A great or virtuous character in a dramatic tragedy who is destined for a downfall, suffering, or defeat. The important word there is destined, the idea that no matter what they do or say, they will inevitably fall, they will inevitably suffer some kind of defeat. This might be seen quite often in plays like by Racine, but what interests me more is this next aspect of a tragic hero. A downfall usually stems from one glaring character flaw, which is often seen as uh, an excess of his greatest virtue. Okay? This is what makes tragedy interesting. Truly, what makes tragedy interesting in this sense is not, oh, there was a good guy and then he died, or there's a bad guy and then he died. It's there was a guy who did good things, but he did those things to such excess that he couldn't see his own flaws, his own mistakes, and that ultimately brought him down. That's what's in the story of Christophe. That's what's in the story of Toussaint. That's what's in the story of Dessalines. That's what's in the story of Pétion. All these characters are larger than life. They are living against the backdrop of a fight for freedom, which has never actually been seen before. This kind of successful fight for freedom has never been seen before or since. And these characters are living in these larger than life times, and they each end up having some kind of great virtue, which ends up being an excess. Could we not do a tragedy of Dessalines, where his greatest virtue was his unfaltering strength and clarity in the need to protect Black people in Haiti? And then that also leads to the excess of his virtue with his excess of violence and totalitarian nature, right? Like it all ties into itself. The point of a tragedy is not to look at the character and say that guy sucks. It's not to say that guy's bad. It's to say, look at what happened. Look at this virtue that became a flaw. Look at how they paid for that flaw. That's what Césaire understands. That's what he saw in Henri Christophe. That's what, frankly, the story of where he came from, Martinique, it's still a part of France, right? You don't even have that story. This backdrop of the Haitian Revolution is, in my opinion, one of, if not the most evocative historical events in human history. Just in terms of the characters and the stakes and all these things that have happened. And so I'm taking my time on this beautiful Tuesday to describe to you the importance of this, frankly, not particularly well appreciated play. This is not considered to be like one of the great plays of the Francophone literary canon, which I think it should be. Okay. I never read it for class. I read it for fun. So, what is Christophe's greatest virtue? What is his greatest virtue? Well, According to Césaire, this is my interpretation of Césaire's work. This is also, I think, a really good way of seeing him as a figure throughout history. The need to have Haiti and the Haitians be taken seriously. They must be taken seriously. They must be treated the same as anyone else. That, I believe, is his greatest virtue. Now, often that took the form of him having himself be taken seriously, which can be manipulated or perceived of as being self-serving. But how can this become a flaw? How can this become a flaw? The virtue in excess. His obsession with being taken seriously can go to a point of where he becomes an object of ridicule, where he made Haiti the object of ridicule. And we'll be studying that throughout this class. Why did he call himself a king? Why did he build these beautiful buildings, which we just studied in the class, the citadel and sans souci? Why did he create an aristocracy? Because he wanted to be taken seriously, but yet this desire led to his own downfall. There's also in this play quite a bit. I just have to explain this to my students. What Ney and Breslin call surrealistic poetic soliloquy. So soliloquy. The most famous one is Hamlet saying to be or not to be. That is the question. Let's be frank. That's kind of a surrealistic poetic soliloquy in itself, where Hamlet is thinking about the nature of ending his own life, and he ends up putting it forth. He doesn't say, "Should I off myself?" Instead, he says this whole question about perchance to dream, etc. This play is filled with those, but they are all tinged with negritude. They're all tinged with the political realities of both post-colonial, uh, the post-colonial Caribbean, post-colonial Africa. This is a play that was written in 1963, and so it is a lot about Haiti in the early 19th century, but it is also entirely about and reflecting uh, post-colonial Africa and the African diaspora in the 20th century, right? So all these soliloquies are flavored by that. And then there's the question, is this comical? It's interesting because there's a part in here where he says that the Duke of Lemonade. They talk about the Duke of Lemonade, and I read somewhere, I think it was in Dubois, maybe. Where is it? Where's Dubois? Oh, it's somewhere around here. Said that people laughed at it because they thought it was a joke, but like Lemonade was a place in Haiti. Um, there is a degree to which I wonder how much Césaire is challenging us to laugh. That if we see a black guy wearing a crown and calling himself king and creating an aristocracy, I wonder if he's not challenging us to laugh. Because when we laugh at a black king and we don't laugh at a white king, we are essentially reinforcing the idea that a white king is right and a black king is laughable. Why is that? Because of systemic racism, because the long history, the subjugation of people. So I think I think it's, in my opinion, it is comical and it is daring you to laugh. Because if you laugh, you are to a certain extent reinforcing the racism that the play is trying to fight against. Okay? It's complicated. It's complicated stuff. That's why I teach this class. The setting and time. So, where are we in the Haitian Revolution? We are at this point. After Dessalines is assassinated, he was assassinated by Pétion in the south, who was a great general and leader. He is colored, uh, a free person of color who had a fair amount of power before the revolution and now is very powerful in the post-revolution Haiti and Henri Christophe, and they fought against each other. They agreed to create a parliament and a senate and a people and a president. So that was what they decided. They decided Dessalines was basically a dictator. We are going to have a parliament and a senate. Pétion, the problem was Pétion, like I said, the term is colored. That's the term that's used like back then. It's not good nomenclature now. It's not proper terminology now, but that's the term that was used. That's for people who are half black, half white, or a quarter black, three quarters white, the three quarters black, one quarter white, etc. Often in pre-revolution Haiti, they were free. They had rights stripped from them before the revolution, but they still were free. They often owned land. They often owned people. They often owned enslaved people as well. They often were very educated. So, in the power vacuum, after Dessalines had literally massacred 90% of the white population in Haiti, this left a power vacuum. And who was going to fill it? The large majority of people were either Africans, like taken from Africa to Haiti within the last 50 years, or descendants of Africans who were considered black. That's the majority of people, but the majority of people with education, with access to power, with knowledge of governmental systems, many of whom had been in Europe, like if they're trying to create a state, trying to create a republic, then like there is a sort of unfortunate divide. So, who is going to rule? Who is going to lead? Somebody who represents the black experience or the colored experience? It's a question which continues, as far as I can tell, to this day in Haiti, amazingly enough. So, they ended up creating two separate republics that ended up being one republic one and one kingdom. So in the north, King Henry with the English spelling. The King Henry was in the north, the Kingdom of Henry, the Kingdom of Haiti, and in the south it was Pétion with the Republic of Haiti. Already we have just like a civil war. We have like the backdrop is itself already amazingly evocative. So how does Césaire start this? He starts the entire play with a cockfight, which is where people have chickens fighting against each other. This is a very popular sport in the island of Haiti. It's very brutal, not great for animal rights, but it is very evocative because in this beginning cockfight, Césaire has the cocks named either Christophe or Pétion. Why is he doing this? I think he's doing this to show the fact that they fought against each other ultimately does a disservice to Haiti. The fact that they're fighting against each other leaves the people in kind of a bad state. They end up sort of rooting for one and rooting for the other, but in the end, what they need is someone to serve them. And it helps to sort of immediately de-escalate the grandiose nature of this play by having the main characters be called chickens. And this delves into the inherent drama of these two characters. The inherent drama. Okay, a formerly enslaved person, a free person of color, a powerful general, both served with and fought against the French. Please watch the first half of my class to explain who Pétion and Christophe were, especially the last two classes that I have up here on YouTube. I'll explain the whole history of Christophe and Pétion. Okay, but this is an amazingly dramatic situation. They were both leaders. They were both the first people to lead after Toussaint and Dessalines, the two biggest names in the revolution. They both were trying to figure out how to lead Haiti 10 years after its freedom. How do you do it? How do you make a republic out of a majority of people who were enslaved and did not have an education and did not have formation and were not in any position to start a republic? How are they going to do that? That's the drama. And not for nothing, but Henri Christophe, if you will remember, is a king with two dead sons. The first son was killed by France because he sent him to France to get educated, and they killed him. The second son was killed after he died. After Henri died, the second son was killed by the people of Haiti. The drama writes itself. I will also be showing images from and referencing an excellent video that is on YouTube. It is all in French, so unfortunately you have to speak French. La mission de coopération et action culturelle près l'ambassade de France en Haïti. So it's put together, I guess, by the French embassy in Haiti, and it is a great representation of this play. I'll include a link in the description, so you will see some images from it, like this one here. So I'm going to go through the acts, and I'm going to take out certain parts that are important. I'm going to quote. I'm going to kind of get you into the play. All right, this is how I teach literature, at least at a 200 level. If I was at a 300 level, 400 level, I'd probably be more Socratic. I'd probably just sort of say like, describe this and let them go. But frankly, it's October break. It's October break. I don't expect my students to frankly, I don't expect them to have actually read the goddamn play. I'm a little bit scared about that. I mean, the motivated ones will. So I'm going to have to explain to them a lot in the class. So Act 1, 1. After the prologue with the two cocks fighting, we have Pétion who gives Christophe his presidency. All right. This is an amazing scene in which we have Pétion describe how the Senate has given the power to Henri. And if you will remember from last class or two classes ago, this was not appreciated because the power that was given to Christophe was way less power than Dessalines had and way less power than Toussaint had. And essentially, Christophe knew that if Pétion was controlling the Senate, which he was, and if the Senate was all basically all colored, uh, former free people of color from the South, that it would end up being ruled by Pétion and that he would be president in name only. And this is the origin of the civil war that will happen between Christophe and Pétion, which Césaire is going to go through oh so quickly. There's one of my favorite lines where Pétion says, I speak of principles, you speak only of yourself. This goes to one of the central ironies, and this was something that I quoted in my last class, that people actually see that the kingdom was more free, was more democratic than the republic was because Pétion ended up grabbing so much power and controlling so much of the Senate. So, anyways, it kind of goes at the hypocrisy of Pétion. Act one, part two is a sort of traditional scene of the people talking. So it's not Pétion, it's not Christophe, it's them, and they see a ship. And what I love about this is that, that there's like a ship, and it's spoken in this very kind of poetic way. There's no way my students are going to understand it because they talk about a whale. So my students are going to be like, "Was there a whale?" It's all poetic. I don't blame them. Would I have understood this play when I was 17 years old? Hell no. I'm 48 with a doctorate. It's my job to explain it. But the fear. So this is describing before the actual Civil War, right? This is describing when they're figuring out how to get going, how to set up this new republic they're hoping to get going. And the idea of a ship in the port is the constant fear of the people of Haiti, constantly, because the French could at any point and planned it multiple times to just come back, invade, and probably maybe reestablish slavery. So this is where we have Vasté, who's going to become the Baron de Vasté, which we'll talk about in a second, explaining how they need a king. Because, as it says there in the subtitles, the French do not respect republics. Because at this point, Louis the 18th was now in power. Napoleon was long gone. France was back in one of its monarchies. Okay. So again, it's the question of how do you get respect? How can you be an all black, formerly enslaved country and get the respect of Europe? I don't know. Maybe we should try being a monarchy. They seem to like that over there, which leads to the coronation and the birth of aristocracy. That's where I think we're supposed to be challenged to laugh. They were supposed to see them and think about the concept of laughing. The greatest virtue was the need to have Haiti and Haitians be taken seriously, the tragic downfall of this virtue in excess. So he gets coronated. He has this moment, and like that's a noble thing that he does because he is doing anything he possibly can to be taken seriously and therefore have his people being taken seriously. But he probably goes too far in the aristocracy. He probably goes too far and he's going to have to pay for it. And he gives this beautiful speech, which I just need to give because this, in my opinion, is some of the best writing in the play. This is, I believe, Césaire using. Okay. So it's written in 63, right? So this is before. Uh, is this before? One second. Yes. It's 1 year before the boxer, formerly known as Cassius Clay, changes his name to Muhammad Ali, raising the point about black names being not the names of the people. And I think this is Césaire here. He's going to be discussing. Remember how I said that Césaire is challenging us to laugh? I think we're being challenged to laugh as he goes around and names people the Duke of Pleasantry and like they're seriously like the Duke of the Dirty Hole. That's one of them. I'm serious. The Duke of the Dirty Hole. That's one of them that's being said here. And the Duke of Lemonade and the Duke of Candy, all these things. I think we're being challenged to laugh. Because in this scene here, Christophe is going to deliver one of his soliloquies where he describes that you can laugh at these names, but these names are names that we're choosing. We're not taking the names that were given to us after our actual names were taken away. This is a profound, deep statement of negritude in the post-war era, right? Like, what is our name? What is our actual rights? What is our name? So I will read, I will do my best to read this soliloquy as Henri Christophe. In all its profound seriousness, long ago someone stole our names, our pride, our nobility. Someone, oh yes, someone stole them from us. Pierre, Paul, Jacques, Toussaint. Someone branded us with these marks of humiliation. Someone destroyed our true names, even mine. I, your king. Side note here, this is important because he's constantly fighting for his own personal dignity as a way to fight for the dignity of his people. But when he takes it to excess, it's because it becomes hubris, it becomes pride in himself. Okay, this is his greatest virtue, which will become his flaw. Okay, back to the play. Even mine, I, your king. Do you feel the grief of a man who does not know what his name is or what his name means? Alas, none but Mother Africa knows. Well, claimed or unclaimed, we have to decide. And I say claimed. It is to ourselves that we claim in our names. We who were torn apart must do the tearing. Ourselves, our names, since we cannot tear them free from our past, we will have to tear them free in our future. So listen, a super duper white guy whose ancestors most likely owned slaves. Most likely my ancestors participated in the slave trade. Okay, so I'm giving a very stirring speech here, but I'm sorry that I'm speaking so abstractly here. It does not pertain to my own lived experience. But is this not a beautiful? Is this not beautiful? Is this not beautiful writing? Is this not describing the idea? Right? Like you can laugh at me, but if we can't claim the past, we will claim our future. And this is Césaire using Christophe to embody these ideas of negritude, the dignity that was taken is to be returned tenderly. Now, I will cover your slave names with names of glory, our names of disgrace with proud names, our orphan names with the names of redemption. It is of a new birth, gentlemen, that we speak. Mere babies' rattles, no doubt, but rattles are shaken. Stony islet? Thousands of half-naked blacks, the sea vomited up one evening, from whence they came, when their odor of hunted beasts, a shaking, an earthquake, a white savannah, as my old Bambara ancestors said, a shaking with power to speak, to do, to construct, to build, to be, to name, to bind, to remake, well then I will take it all. I well understand its weight, and will carry it. Okay? So remember when I said that everybody in France, when they first saw this, saw someone say, I'm the Duke of Lemonade, and they all laughed. Well, who's laughing now? Okay? These are orphaned names of redemption. But again, his greatest virtue will end up being his downfall. He takes the weight of his people, but as we see, he's going to go too far. We have the coronation with the bishop, the representative of maybe not a bishop. I don't know what the exact term is. He has some specific term uh, in uh, in the island here. I will find it in the French original. I'm really going to need my glasses for this. One second. So Cornet Brel is the Duke. Yeah, the first bishop of Cap Haitien. Okay, so he's a white guy who represents the Catholic Church, and he crowns him the King of Haiti. All right, important, connected to the church. And again, is this scene supposed to be played for comic reasons? I will leave that for you to decide. He says at the end, ah, sprung from the lowest groveling, from inert suffering, son of sudden rising, jewel inestimable, I set you on the head of this accursed people. So he's putting the crown on the people, not just him. Staff of command, I clench the fist of my race. Yesterday enslaved, I clench our fists. Listen, I love literature. I do. I love it. It gives you a pathway to understanding deeper truths in a way that nonfiction cannot. I don't think that Henri Christophe would have said, I clench our fists, but it is such a beautiful way of thinking about his project, the glory and beauty of his project. He is clenching his fist around the rod of command, around the scepter. He is clenching his individual fist. But what he is saying is, I clench our fists. Look at that shift of pronoun, of subject pronoun from I to our. I clench our fists. Writing does not get better than that. Literature does not get better than the sentence, I clench our fists. It is four syllables. I clench our fists. And within it is the entirety of this play, of the nobility of Christophe's idea and perhaps the megalomaniacal distance that he has from his people because he thinks he's doing it in their name. But as we're going to see, he is going to alienate himself and ultimately end up taking his own life after being hated by the people whose fists he clenched. Act 1.5, it jumps to a civil war where we had this very important character, Metellus, who represents the Bosal rebels, right? So we talked about Sanssouci in the class before, who was a Bosal. That means people who were born in Africa. If you will remember, uh, Christophe was not. Christophe was born on the island, okay? So Christophe was born on the island, but the majority of people who he was ruling over were born in Africa. And there were a lot of rebels who never bent the knee to France or to Spain, or if they did, it was just for a second. Right? They never really even went in fully with Toussaint or Dessalines. They came to Haiti. Many of them escaped before the revolution, but when the revolution went off, they started their own little communities. They had guerrilla wars. They were far away. They were outside of this project of Haiti being like some grand European nation that happens to be in the Caribbean. Instead, they were opting for more smaller community-based groups of people who are free to do what they want, perhaps at the expense of a gross domestic project. So Metellus represents this, and he has a beautiful soliloquy, which I really suggest you read. I'm not going to read to you, but find it, okay? It's in the book. I'm telling you, I'm giving you the link of how to read the play. Christophe, Pétion, double tyranny, I reject them both. That is the position of many people in the entire country. Act 1.6 represents the sort of end of the Civil War, where it seems like Christophe could probably strike, but he ends up holding back a little bit. There's a scene of the Senate in Port-au-Prince, which is again mostly staffed by powerful landowning people who were free people of color before the revolution and now own most of the land in the south of the country. There's an amazing speech here. What I love is that this act is it. I'll read this. Yes, gentlemen, there's one thing of which I am sure, which we are all sure. Christophe's monarchy is a caricature, and everybody claps. But I am beginning to wonder whether we ourselves cut a better figure, whether this republic of ours is not a caricature of a republic, and our parliament a caricature of parliament. So Césaire is pointing out the difficulty of statecraft. He's pointing out the perhaps even impossibility, the near impossibility of starting with a former slave state and transforming it into a real democracy, a real republic. And so we have Metellus, who's this rebel general who is going to get murdered by the end of the act, and he's going to get killed, right? And he says, Pétion, Christophe, a double tyranny, who wants them? And then we have this person who presumably was educated in Europe, who represents the highest levels of class and sophistication that exist in Haiti at this moment. And he says, Christophe's an idiot and a joke. But so are we. It's the pain. How do you create a nation starting with less than less than less than less than less than less than zero? Less than negative 10, less than negative a million. How do you start a nation like that? How can you possibly start a nation from that position? That's all. And important to note, this is in the 60s. This is still the period of time where a lot of Former colonies of European superpowers are gaining independence, and these kinds of questions are popping up. How do you avoid being a caricature? How do you go from servitude to freedom in a way where you maintain dignity and prosper? How do you do it? It is one of the hardest questions in human existence, and one which, frankly, they don't teach about in school. They don't teach about these things in school. We just spend all of our time talking about Thomas Jefferson. I don't know. Thomas Jefferson's fine, I guess. And then we have all these representatives here speaking. Better Louis the 18th than Christophe. You know, they're so that the people of the South are so mad at Christophe, they see him as a joke. And we have this beautiful line. And again, I think this is Césaire speaking through Christophe. Poor Africa, or rather, poor Haiti. It's the same thing anyway. Oh, it's the same thing anyway. Africa and Haiti are the same thing. Do you understand what Césaire is doing here? Back there, the tribes, the languages, rivers, castes, forests, town against town, village against village. Here, blacks, mulattoes, quadroons, Obeah men, God knows what, clan, caste, color, distrust, rivalry, and cockfights and dogfights over a bone. Louse fights. He talks about us being a louse versus a flea, which I thought were the same thing. That the subjugation and deprivation of dignity has reduced them to fighting over nothing. We have a beautiful celebratory banquet here, which again, we are being dared to laugh at the airs of someone like the master of ceremony. Again, the greatest virtue is the need to have Haiti and Haitians taken seriously. By having an aristocracy, by having a banquet, it's communicating seriousness. It's communicating a state. It's communicating sophistication. But perhaps it is an excess. There's a discussion of the national drink, which I didn't pick up the first time I read this play, but I've since picked up on it. And they discuss there's a court jester named Hugonin. Hugonin. I don't know how you pronounce it in English. Hugonin. And they discuss like that it should be beer or champagne. But champagne can only come from a certain part of France. So that can't be. The national drink of Haiti cannot be champagne. It must be rum. Why rum? Well, what is rum made from? Rum is made from sugarcane. So, just this one choice of Césaire helps to connect you to the history of the island, why they are there in the first place. The reason that the Africans were taken from Africa and put in Haiti was for the goddamn sugar. That's why. And now that is the basis of what will be their national drink. We have a little speech here about the difficulty of statecraft. Again, I think we have to see this play in the context of a post-colonial world in which a lot of former colonial states were trying to figure out how to become independent nations. A nation is not a creation, but rather a gradual ripening, year by year, ring by ring. Well, isn't that good? Be prudent. Sow, he tells me. Sow the seeds of civilization. Right. But unfortunately, those grow damn slowly. That is the problem of statecraft. That's the difficulty. France took centuries to be France. Centuries. It wasn't even. What you think Charlemagne called it France? No. Like it took centuries to build the culture and civilization. And people like Christophe, people like Dessalines, people like Toussaint don't even have more than a couple years to figure out how to rule, to try to figure out how to lead before they are taken away or killed. It's at this point that Madame Christophe arrives, the Queen of Haiti. And she acts as a kind of conscience, a kind of moderating force. Like any good tragedy will have this kind of figure. In French, it's called a raisonneur, a raisonneuse, someone who speaks reason to the person in power, the person who is going to suffer the tragedy, right? Because the protagonist in a tragedy is like somebody who has that excess. So there has to be someone around them to try to bring them into line. And in this case, it's his wife, who is the raisonneuse, the reasonable one. And so let's see what she says to him. Take care, Christophe. If you try to put the roof of one hut on another, it will be too little or too big. Christophe, don't ask too much of people or of yourself. Besides, I am a mother, and when I see you carried away by the wild horse of your heart, my own heart stumbles, and I say to myself, if only the day doesn't come when the majority of my children tells the story of a father's immoderation. Our children, Christophe, think of our children. Oh God, how will it end? I think this is the children, as in their actual children, who we know the two sons will be killed. And I think it's also the children being the people of Haiti who are being carried away by the wild horse of his heart. And she's expressing these pains. And she keeps saying, don't ask too much of the people or of yourself. And here's where Césaire just goes even further with another amazing point, which I hadn't really thought of. It just makes you just, Henri's speech here is just masterful. I ask too much of men, but not enough of black men, drawing the distinction between what one must ask of men in general in the abstract, the men of the sentence, all men are created equal, and the men who he's actually serving, the men who he actually is leading, who are black men. And he's drawing apart the concept of inequality, that black men have to work harder than other men. And this is a statement of negritude and a statement about Haiti, that it's not fair, but that it's true. All men have the same rights, agreed, but some men have more duties than others. That's where the inequality comes in. So he's talking about a new kind of inequality in which people of African descent have to work harder than people not of African descent to obtain the same amount of freedom and prosperity. The paradox is many of these people, especially in the immediately after slavery, are not interested in working as hard as one needs to work in order to establish a republic, because they were working twice as hard as that, so that some rich douchebags in Bordeaux were getting super rich. Let's go back to let's go back to the play here. We alone, madam, do you hear me? We blacks, from the bottom of the pit we cry out. From the bottom of the pit we cry out for air, the light, the sun. And if we are going to climb out, don't you see we need tense muscles, clenched teeth, cool, clear heads. Ah, yes, heads. And that's why I have to ask more of blacks than of other people. More faith, more enthusiasm, a step, another step, and still another, and never a step backwards. In order for Haiti to prosper, he must push Haitians with extreme severity. That's his belief. He is trying to serve the people of Haiti. But this greatest virtue might be his downfall, because he might be pushing the people too hard, given their life experience. An engineer comes up in this final scene of Act One and says, we need a patrimony. I'm going to have to explain that to my students, so I'll explain it to you. What is patrimony? Well, the real definition is inheritance coming by right of birth, especially primogeniture, inheritance, heritage. They need it. This is why we're going to create Sanssouci. This is why we're going to create the citadel, this object, this beautiful place, which I've already described. Exactly what this people has to want, to gain, to achieve something against fate, against history, against nature. That's it. Extravagant venture of our bare hands, insane challenge of our wounded hands on this mountain, a solid cornerstone, a firm foundation, assault of heaven or sun's resting place. The citadel as a symbol of defiance and as heritage for the people to come. An impossible building built in impossible situations by impossible people that will be handed on to the people of Haiti in perpetuity forever, as it still stands there now. The sun's resting place. Reposoir du soleil, the sun's dwelling place. In Voodoo, reposoir means a tree or any other place where a Loa is supposed to live. We'll talk about that when we get to Creole. It's an intermediary to the gods, to the god. A Catholic terminology, it is a reliquary. A citadel is a reliquary and a home for the gods of Voodoo. One way of thinking about it. There it is, the little tree. the citadel. The citadel. That was Sun Tzu. This is the citadel. This object is how the play is going to end Act One, creating this. And there's this whole speech where they say, how can you possibly build it on top of the hill? To which Christophe responds, precisely, this people must claim for itself, must will and succeed at something impossible against fate, against nature. Ah, unheard of attack by our bare hands, born of wounded hands, our wild defiance on this mountain. Assault of heaven or sun's dwelling place, I don't know. The first charge of morning watch. Look, Bessa, that's the name of the engineer, on this unlikely platform, turned toward Magnetic North, 130 feet high, 20 feet thick in the walls of limestone and the ashes of cane thrash, limestone and bull's blood, a citadel, not a palace, not a strong house to protect my goods. I say the citadel, the liberty of all the people, built by the whole people, men and women, children and elders, built for the whole people. See how its head dreams towards the clouds, its feet plumb the abyss, while its mouth spit grape shot as far as the open sea and the hollows of the valleys. It is a city, a fortress, a massive breastplate of stone, impregnable, Bessa, impregnable. Yes, Mr. Engineer, to each people its monuments, for this people forced to its knees, a monument that will set it upright, right here, rising, watching. Now he hallucinates. Look, don't you see that it lives? Its sound is charged through the fog. Its lights blaze at nightfall. It cancels the slave ship. Vast procession on horseback, my friends, who have drunk bitter salt and the dark wine of the sand. Both you and I thrown down by the heavy swell. I have seen the enigmatic prow with spray and beat through the wave of contempt. May my people, my black people, salute the fragrance and flood tide of the future, as an image of the citadel appears, clearly seen in the distance, as his hallucination comes true. So that's the end of Act 1. Stay tuned the 17th to the next class, where we will discuss Acts 2 and 3. How will this tragedy become a tragedy? We are at the sort of the high point where he's going to create this patrimony. But how will he create it? What will the people think? What's going to happen? Stay tuned. All right, there's the camera.